Al Bailey, Scioto Township President.
Vince Crusoe, Alice, Ann Arbor resident, card for the treasurer.
Mike Maureen, oh, sorry.
Feel free.
Mike Maureen,
Save the
Ann
best for
Arbor
last.
Township.
Kristen Schwakehofer, I'm the Environmental Health Director with Washington County Public Health.
I'm Roger Rail. I'm Chair of CARD and Chair of Sci Residents for Safe Water. This is my 24th year working on the Gelman site as a citizen volunteer. So. All right. Jenny, you have some minutes?
Yeah, so I move that we approve the minutes from the August meeting.
Okay, all in favor?
Anybody second?
Second.
Is Roger second? Okay, so all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? No, okay.
Okay, I put this little thing on here for breaking updates because I didn't know if there's going to be any new breaking updates. The one that's minor I'll mention is we got a email that they were putting in, they wanted to put in a new building on the Porter and Wagner Road area. And we wondered what that was all about, because that's where the junction is.
Let me go potty.
Do you want to go?
No, I can do it.
You know where it is? Down the hall.
I mean, Mom, that got back.
So it's right here. It's where the junction of the pipelines from the south and from the north on this little parcel of land that just missed introductions. This is Mary. What's your last
Hi,
name?
Mandeville.
She was at the meeting, at the town hall meeting, and wants to get involved. Nice one. And this is Conan Smith.
Hey, guys.
If you know everybody here, Conan, you can set up at the big boy table.
Should I sit here with my back up?
I'm not sure what I'm backing up tonight.
Aren't you supposed to say everything the commissioner says is accurate? Truthful. Right, good. No?
You know, other duties as assigned. Duties in my job description.
Apologize for being late.
How do we start?
It's a building on the corner of Wagner and.
Yeah, so Wagner and Porter is where they have a little building there. In fact, you can see it in this aerial photograph. It's right there. And this is the junction. This is where they drilled the horizontal wells up to Evergreen and back to the core. These 17-inch boreholes, and they pulled in some 6-inch and 4-inch, I think, pipes. Well, I guess it turns out that this building isn't high enough. It gets flooding when it rains hard, so they want to raise it up. Is that right, Bryce? So it's not anything major like we thought. Is it doing something new to the pipeline? I did have some series of questions that we can get answered on that to make sure that they're not doing anything.
Where does the water go?
The water goes through here and then back to the core. All the way back to right about here. If you walk back there, you can actually see where the pipe comes out of the ground, but then they have an underground junction that takes it all the way back along one of their pathways here back to their treatment building, which is right here, I think.
Right. So it does get to a treatment facility on the original campus?
Yeah, yeah, and then it gets mostly treated and put into the discharge pond, and then from the pond it goes back out and gets discharged right about here, just across the tributary from Toyota's back lot.
So what's that creek's name? Is that, they just
It's
call
an
it?
unnamed tributary.
Unnamed tributary?
Yeah, I think somebody tried to name it once, it didn't stick. So there's two tributaries on this area. This is the northern one that runs from the first sister lake over. You can kind of see that this is not nature made right here. In fact, if you go out and look at this is not nature made either, and neither is this. This is actually, this is actually a man-made, these are all man-made ponds here. Used to just be a marshy area back in the day.
Here, Conan.
So Roger, one of the,
Did you pass an agenda?
Oh, and then the southern tributaries down here from the third sister lake to these peat mining lakes, and then joins up the first tributary before it empties into Honey Creek proper.
so the thing that caught me by surprise, so I had sent this off to Mitch, and no one at their end knew that this was even on the books.
The building.
That,
If you don't mind sitting over here,
Just a second.
because we're actually videoing this, and if you talk, people won't know who's talking.
Thanks.
so,
Yeah. Could you pass the sign-in sheet down? Yeah, if everybody can sign
Sorry
it,
to be
please.
late.
Thanks.
Came right from work.
Yeah, and there's agendas, can you pass an agenda down? Thanks.
I'm all set.
So Bryce, the DQ didn't know about this new building they're putting on the Porter site?
yeah, and so it was actually Hamel who called Prasad to give us the detail again. So I'm just, as I get to understand, this is just to make an existing facility work better, but I was surprised that the DEQ wouldn't have been involved in the loop even for us, so, I don't know.
And it supposedly was prompted because sometimes it floods?
Yes,
The
when
people there
in
were
flooding
getting
events,
confused.
it backs in, but the other part of it is that somebody got a hands on a newspaper article, I think Kathy, you sent it to me, that line fails.
Well, it's
and I don't know what that
twice.
means. What does
I
failure
got it
mean?
from Roger's side of residence for Safe Water website.
So what does failure mean?
You see that.
Does the pump go off, or does it leak? And if it leaks, isn't that a bad thing?
They had a break twice in their transmission pipeline. What happened was, they didn't want, they had a treatment system at Evergreen. And they're pumping from just one or two wells at the time. And they're re-injecting like just down the road from it. And then they, let's see which street switch here. And then they, that injection well kept plugging, so they wanted to inject somewhere else. So they went down and they made another injection well. And it's right here, IW2. Well, at the time they were injecting to this, of course, it wasn't contaminated. Because they were treating to non-detect here at Evergreen with that system that was guaranteed to treat from 500 parts per billion down to non-detect. But they needed to re-inject here, they needed to have a pipeline. So the city made them put a double wall pipe in. You don't have manhole covers every so often, so they could tell if it leaked. And it's a good thing, because it turns out that pipeline, even though it's only a little bit below the surface, leaked. And they would detect it and find it and fix it. But then they said, the amount of dioxane coming here was overwhelming that smaller system. We were getting more than 500 parts per billion. That was only rated to go to 500 parts per billion. So instead of working with the local units to build a pipeline back to the core, they bypassed the local units by going deep underground where the local units don't have any jurisdiction. It's more like oil drilling. It's more like fracking. In fact, the company they use, Longboard, out of Fort Worth or someplace like that, that's what they do. They do kind of fracking. So, but they were drilling down 90 to 100 feet and then horizontal. And this kind of makes a loop over here and joins up with where the pipe from IW2 was. So they had to go from here over to here, and that's a pretty good distance.
How much they paid for that?
A couple $1 million. Just so they didn't have to deal with the local units requirements.
So Kristen, this comes about, Kroll Constructions asked for a pre-app meeting with us to do this work. So, wasn't until over the weekend that I found out it was a stormwater thing. So I'm gonna send it over to Evan, but
Okay.
do you guys wanna be there too, for any reason, just to listen? I'll send you the invitation.
Yeah, send me
Figure
the
it out.
invitation, the information, I'll see what we've got, but, I mean, that's Evan's well elect for sure, and he represents as well. Thanks.
So I'm sorry, Bryce, they're building a whole new building?
I don't know, that's why we're having.
Oh,
pre-app
okay.
meeting. I don't know,
So-
we don't know.
So it's something to do with a new building or modifying the
What we
existing
know is they
building?
want to effect repairs to a stormwater problem. That's all we know, and that comes from Farsad to Mitch, or to Dan Hamill to us. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, do we know it's stormwater? We know it's water.
Yeah, good question, I don't know. Well, if it's a flooding event, somewhere the stormwater's got to have an impact, but,
It's not water from the system.
well, that's why I asked the question about the failing system.
A good question.
What does a failing system mean? So we'll see. So that's 14th, 16th, or what frame put down. So it's next week.
I have pictures I shared with Kathy that showed what the flooding was like when they were building, when they were drilling those wells. The street was closed off part of the time and there was water on the lawns. They actually didn't have enough room on this parcel that they bought. So they got permission from the woman next door who's retired and has cancer. They said, well, you know, this will help the cleanup if we can use part of your property. And she wasn't told the whole story about it. So that flooding ended up affecting her property as well as the property they bought here for this. And as well as the road got closed off a few times. Anyway, so they had this pipeline, and the company, Longboard, said, well, you know, while you're drilling this big hole for a transmission pipeline back from Evergreen, why don't you pull a couple horizontal wells? And what that just means is a pipe, and they had a couple 200-foot screens, I think, on it, that were underneath this highly contaminated area here. And at the time, the city had an expert come in from Star Environmental, and I briefed him for part of a day before the hearing. And his conclusion was that whole plan was just a back of the napkin plan, because, you know, horizontal wells, what could go wrong? Putting that next to transmission pipelines, well, it's in a sand area, sand aquifer. And the problem they were having after they got it going is they couldn't pump as much as they wanted from the horizontal wells because they were getting all the sand, which was created a void someplace in the middle, which may have caused the transmission pipeline to sag and eventually leak. And that email, one of the emails I just documented was over a several month period before we found out about this leak between the DQ and the company. They didn't have a ready way they didn't have a contingency plan for that leak. And they tried all sorts of things to reline it, and they couldn't even inspect it. You know, the cameras kept getting stuck, and they had to flush it out, and finally they did reline the horizontal wells. They did reline the horizontal wells, which took away the purging capability and then gave them another transmission pipeline back from Evergreen. Now, I guess the same thing happened a few years later with the southern portion that goes back to the core. So the company that did this won a national award for the longest horizontal drilling of its type.
For this work? or
For their
different?
boring, yeah. I don't think that award got rescinded when the pipes broke. But, you know, I sent an email off to whoever said, you know, are you gonna rescind this order?
I think you had to be there to
Well,
appreciate it.
the important part of what happened on Friday with the message was I wanted to make sure that Gelman understood that we all talk to each other.
Right.
And by the way, everybody that I sent something to responded.
Good.
And, you know, so, and the only common group that would report that to Gelman was DEQ. So, and I've indicated to our staff that I want to know who's coming, because if it's just the construction guy, it's not good enough. I mean, Kroll is just a concrete guy.
Right.
He's not going to be able to answer questions I want to answer. So it's straightforward. With the limited bit we know, it's probably administrative, but it needs to be, gives us a chance to learn stuff. So thank you for everybody who was on that and responded. And again, the idea is Gelman needs to know we're all on the same page. Hey, Christian, if you give her your credit card number, just give her the credit card number, then she's good.
I have a feeling she'd already figured out a way to do it.
Okay, good.
She's gotten stuff that I didn't know she.
Yeah,
She's post-millennial.
yeah.
And there's two.
Double trouble and twice as nice.
You're gonna have so much fun in high school.
Fun's a word.
That's the easy part, getting through high school.
Right.
So
Anyway.
is that the first breaking update?
Yeah, that was the breaking update, which was, you know, turns out not to be that big a
It's
deal.
not-
Well, the other.
The other breaking update
Sorry.
is the challenge, is the appeal to the Supreme Court by the company to disallow all the interveners in the court case. And that is a big deal,
Yeah.
because basically you got 2 out of 3 people can decide whether the local community has any say in court.
Didn't I also read that part of the motivation for appealing to the Supreme Court was to put DEQ in a position of having to review the higher versus lower standard? In other words, if DEQ is one of the few respondents to the Supreme Court, they could ask the Supreme Court to also review the standards, which DEQ, even at the town hall meeting, said there was some contention about higher, lower, and I didn't.
But that was, the contention there was about the vapor intrusion standards, whether it's 29.
Well, there was
or
also,
1900.
maybe
but
I
the-
missed it, but I
but the
thought there was also a
7.2
discussion about the liquid concentrations.
Well, the 7.2, I think that's, everybody agree, it sounds like that's on its way.
That's done. That's going to be.
Seems to be.
Yeah.
It still has to go
solid,
to.
pretty solid.
Has
But
to
does
go to OR, I
DEQ
think,
fully
so.
support that?
Well, the
Yeah.
DEQ does, but whether the next agency, yeah. You know,
Or
So-
whether some non-technical judge someplace or panel of judges?
So here's our take on it, because we're in the middle of that. This is only an attempt to make us spend a lot more money than we are. We call it death by 1,000 paper cuts. The township is into this serious, and so by doing this, we're going to roll out another $100,000. We're committed, but that's the game. The game is to outspend us. And
So who's paying for this effort?
every one of us is paying individually.
I mean, as
All the
far on the Gelman
interveners.
side.
Oh, Denver.
I don't
Donaher.
know.
So Donaher's paying, not only this court case, they're paying the salaries of the Gelman's people
I don't know.
as well?
We don't know.
I don't know.
We don't know.
I'm
Well,
told
it-
that the salaries are being paid by Donaher.
Well, you don't know who's on the check. It's probably Gelman Sciences by now, but when they first took over, it was definitely Paul. We have the letter
Yeah.
from or email from the Danaher guy saying, Paul's, it's really a Paul thing.
Mhm.
And then later on, they split Gelman, put it back on Gelman for the
Mhm.
20, 30 years and $30 million.
One more thing on the Supreme Court appeal. The Court of Appeals decision was a unanimous decision. It was a Republican panel, 2 Republicans, 1 Democrat, and it was unanimous. So that will bode well potentially for the Supreme Court appeal.
Well, more important than that, it's a preliminary decision, it's a discretionary call. The likelihood of success is remote in the extreme, so got to agree with Bryce, it's just to spend money.
They're not gonna pick it up and take the case, you don't think?
Not from here. I mean, on a preliminary, I mean, it is so preliminary a call. It is so far within the realm of discretion of the trial court judge, it's laughable, except for anybody who wants to make you spend money. It's truly laughable. So,
Does anybody, anybody else besides me wonder why we had a whole panel full of state representatives and congressional representatives and someone from DEQ lined up last week, and nobody apparently was aware of the appeal to the Supreme Court that happened 5 days before the town hall meeting? Roger knows I kind of have a short temper.
I think a lot of people didn't know what the details were.
But the
Should've
point
been
is,
disclosed.
but the point
Should've been
is,
disclosed, I think.
Yeah, it should've
they
been
can't,
discussed.
either way, in my humble opinion, that entire panel is suspect. Either they didn't know, in which case it's time to get some new staff that didn't know that there was an appeal to the Supreme Court. I mean, 5 days, we're
It
not
was in the
talking
news.
about 5 hours.
It was in the news after
And-
the town hall.
or-
It was after.
Or,
Well, Ryan found out about it the day of the town hall.
yeah.
Yeah, it was
Like
in the news.
that
It was-
afternoon.
Yeah, but
But
that's
it
still
wasn't
5
published
days
But he
until
wasn't
after.
able to write it until that night.
Yeah, so it was in, it was late. It was after.
We all knew
that,
way in
because I saw
advance
that,
of
it
that
was like,
day.
whoa.
All the interveners knew. And
But they
Because
knew.
I had heard about it before their meeting, but it
I mean,
didn't really
that's-
come
that's
up.
my
It was in the
point.
Detroit
They
Free
either-
Press, maybe, I don't know.
Either
But you
way,
weren't
they
able to
lose.
say anything.
If they
yeah, we
didn't
could've
know,
talked- well, we weren't on the
during that.
panel,
Mhm.
but
if they
everybody,
did know
we
and
were-
didn't say anything, then we were doomed.
everyone that
one
we
way
were
or
in
the other.
contact
You know-
with knew. So a lot of people connected to SIO knew all about it.
Yeah. But-
So,
Yeah, you know, but we're focusing on the wrong thing, I think. So we had 5 legislators there from a federal one all the way down to the county commissioners. First time in a long time, if ever, we've ever done that. They were very candid about what they didn't know and about, you know, their frustration. So the only thing that could have been done better was probably 2 things: a bigger room and more time for people to talk, because it was valuable for people to vent. There's no doubt about it, and people took away. But I got to tell you, again, getting the message across that this is a united effort across a fairly big region from Washington to Scioto Township is impressive, and that helps fortify or validate what we're going after. So, you know, I mean, the remarkable thing is Debbie Dingle sat there for as long as she did, quiet. But all of them were good. And what's unfortunate are the convenient accusations that folks make about campaign funds and about what they hid or didn't know and the pressures. You know, I've come to know most of those people, and I don't find it to be the case. So while I understand your point, I think we need to look at the fact that this is something that has once again rebuilt itself, and I think of value. So they messed up because they put it together too last minute. They couldn't get Slauson because you were literally 4 days from the start of school, and no principal's going to let their building be messed up by anybody.
Yeah,
So it was poorly done, but that'll be fixed.
Cleaning the stuff.
That'll be fixed.
Can I ask a newbie question? I don't want to interrupt you, go ahead and finish.
No, I'm done.
So these parties,
You'll say these guys always want to interrupt.
the parties to the lawsuit, do you feel that they're trying to remove, is it all the right folks at the table now? Do you feel that that's the right group in there?
Well, it's not all. It's
I
not
know that.
all the jurisdictions are.
I know, that's what I don't understand, like, are some prohibited from joining
Nope.
from the prior?
No, some of us have better resources. than
Yeah,
Okay.
that's part of
That's
it.
it.
Yeah.
Because like I see like the Watershed Council, and I think they can't have very deep pockets, but they must have knowledge of it, but,
well, they have an attorney who's working free of charge.
all right, well, there you go.
An expert environment.
All right.
What's that,
Mental
what's his
law.
name, her name?
Oh, what's his name? Ode, He's from Wayne State University,
Okay.
environmental
So
law
that
center.
everybody's kind of, who wanted to join in there is kind of lined up with the best they can do to help.
All the people that are there, I believe, are the right people, and there's a couple of more that we would like to find a way to get involved.
Yeah, that's what it seemed like not enough municipalities were in on it, but.
Yeah, I don't know if that's true. I mean, we got smart people at the table.
Okay.
We talked to the people that we wanted to have there, and, you know, some of us just have different resources.
Yeah.
So that's the way you know, it's just like, it's the same way you run the checkbook at home.
Well, Bryce, can I ask who you think it would be useful
Mike.
to add?
Mike would be
Ann
extremely
Arbor
valuable. I
Township?
wish there was a way we could figure out how to get him, yeah, without a doubt. Besides the fact that he's cute. I'm not saying because he's cute, but I'm saying because he's good at what he does.
And when you say Mike, do you mean Ann Arbor Township as a party, or do you mean Mike Moran and his
I
own
mean-
legal
I mean-
expertise?
I mean,
Yeah.
both. I want to
Yeah.
take advantage of both.
Yeah, okay.
I would agree with that.
And anybody else that you could share of who should be?
There's no secrets. I mean, I think I'm focusing on Ann Arbor Township.
Who is-
Specifically, Mike's institutional knowledge.
City-
Mhm.
city
Yes,
attorney.
that would be
And,
good.
I don't know. I don't know who else, who else should we have?
Am I allowed to ask why Ann Arbor Township isn't an intervener?
It's expensive. It's
The
expensive.
money, that township doesn't want to spend the money?
It's not that they don't want it.
Or, okay.
It's whether you have it or not. We are blessed with a water fund. So our taxpayers, our rate customers are paying for part of it.
So who are the parties then? I'm confused now.
So it's the city of Ann Arbor, Scioto Township, Huron River Watershed Council, White Washtenaw County. Now, you guys are one, or are you separate between water resources and public
We're
health?
all together.
All together.
Washtenaw County.
They're trying to strike the county too.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, everybody who was joined by that last,
Yeah.
okay.
They just want the DEQ.
Right.
Yeah.
And all trying to
They
use
play
those.
nice.
I was confused. I thought that Ann Arbor Township was part of it.
I would,
Well, Ann Arbor Township and,
You guys did the application for the
EPA
Superfund.
Superfund.
Yes, along.
And
That's
so
right.
did
Yeah,
Silas.
sorry.
and the,
I would
Sierra.
like to make
Sierra.
a comment about the vapor intrusion information that DEQ presented. Maybe more than a year, sorry, my aged memory is too fuzzy. But there was
There's a couple of us who have that problem.
what was your name again? And they had something of a town hall meeting at Washtenaw Community College, out there in the Morris Lawrence Auditorium, or not auditorium, meeting room. And it was all DEQ. It was one of the biggest dog and pony shows I've seen since I retired from the auto industry. And in fact, I called it a dog and pony show to the people that were there. There were so many DEQ people there that I commented to, I figured out who was leading the group, don't ask me her name. But I went to her and I said, is anybody in Lansing to answer the phone, or are you all here? I mean, I started counting, I quit at over 20 people from DEQ for one meeting. The point of the meeting was, it was a comment gathering meeting on DEQ's proposals for vapor intrusion for rebuilding over previously polluted sites. In fact, they were talking about a couple of Superfund sites. They had one geologist there who was, I think, out of his depth. But the data that they presented was so convoluted that it was virtually ununderstandable.
you remember
I'm
when-
afraid that the same people that are doing the vapor intrusion to figure out what buildings you can build over a Superfund site, and in some cases, based on several hundred soil types that they categorized for the state. And there was no worst casing about any of the discussion. It was as little as 4 feet.
So they had a
Now,
major problem in
when I was
Petoskey, where they
speaking,
built
when I-
on top of a Superfund site, and that site is a catastrophe. It's
Well,
all condominiums. It was in the news this past summer, and they're going to have to move everybody out. It's all
But
contaminated.
the point I wanted to make was,
Yeah.
before we and the participants in the suit get too excited about basement vapor intrusion, I noticed that when I was speaking, making my comment at the town hall, when I mentioned Michigan basements down east of 7th Street down to the railroad tracks, his eyes dropped and he got real quiet. There are Michigan basements in residential homes and businesses in Ann Arbor. Plain and simple. And I don't recall any discussion at this other meeting at Washington Community College where they took into account a Michigan basement at all. What they were looking at there was new construction designed to prevent vapor intrusion, not 120-100-year-old construction that doesn't have a basement at all.
Yeah, your points are good. So I'm going to ask a favor, if we can park that a little bit and get
Well,
back to some of
my
these.
real point is, before we get too excited about what DEQ is proposing, somehow we need to figure out what vapor intrusion
Right.
is into a
They've
dirt
signed-
basement.
I think,
Because that
Sideline-
could stop that
sideline vapor
discussion
intrusion,
cold.
so vapor intrusion is not really on the table at this point. They've decided they're not going to add it to the,
But it is on the point for the city of Ann Arbor.
I know, but the DEQ is not going,
So-
they decided not to.
They have to. So we didn't get into this at that meeting, but there's actually, in this year's budget for them, an allocation of funding specifically for vapor intrusion, sort of adding a staff person, that's dedicated to the Gelman site.
They were going to add it to the rules.
Oh,
Or
I'm
201.
sorry, yeah, to the rules, right.
It's not going to go into 201
You're right.
anytime soon,
Yeah.
which could be a problem. But that's one of the announcements I think they made at the town hall, basically.
I'm skeptical enough that it will be very selective, Sam.
okay, Mr. Chair?
Yeah,
Yep.
we need to get back, are we on number 4? Are we still reviewing the town hall meeting?
Well, somehow we slipped into that because we were on breaking updates and we got ahead of ourselves there a little bit. So, since we're talking about the town hall, that's the next item. Does anybody else have any feedback on the town hall meeting?
I thought the DEQ was very disingenuous when they said that they had planned to do vapor intrusion, near surface water tests. I have in my notes, I looked at my meeting notes, they categorically stated at our CARD meeting, I think it was 2 meetings, or at least the July meeting, that they were no longer going to do near surface water tests.
I get it, and I think I remember the words, except I'm past that because
Yeah, well,
they
I'm
just
saying-
made a commitment on.
Yeah, I
on
know,
the
I just want to
record.
say,
So-
because they accused me of basically lying,
Yeah,
okay?
yeah.
So I just want to put that out there, that my information discredits that. And actually, they actually said, well, if you talk about Maryfield, we'll do Maryfield if you want. So I toured Maryfield yesterday. And there are no seeps in Maryfield Wildwood. So I'll pass that along to the DEQ that whoever told me there were seeps, they're not there now. So until there are seeps, there's no reason to really test it, because you won't find a seep to test. But, I'm trying to work with the DEQ, and like I said, I toured this, it wasn't an easy tour, there's a lot of brush and stuff in the ravines. So, but I wanted to see if there were seeps. But I think it was disingenuous. I don't know what they were trying to do, but it was not appropriate.
So, for my 2 cents, Mr. Chair, first of all, congratulations, I thought you did a great job.
Yes.
You hit the good points. I don't know why the hell people liked you, but they were applauding you. Must have been the way you combed your hair then. The other thing, and Kathy can disagree with me, but we probably made too big a deal of the court case. Because there was really nothing discussed that night that had anything to do with the court case. There was nothing acted upon, questioned about, that came anywhere near what's going on. So an awful lot of oxygen was used that didn't move us down the road.
Yeah, I mean, people there thought that there were people talking because of the court case, but it really wasn't much
It
overlap.
was just a red herring to keep the county off of the panel.
Yeah. And then the point about the audience frustration and contentiousness, that goes to the fact that I think we need to have more of these. I mean, we heard the venting. We need to give, somebody's paying attention. We sat in this room thinking, I sat in the room over there thinking, my dentist thought it was all cleaned up. He lives in the township, and I said, no, it's not cleaned up. Well, I haven't read about it in the paper. I said, great, that's how you figure out what's up there.
Right. Do you have a paper?
Get your hands out of my mouth. Yeah. We have to have more of these, because at some point, there is a core, there is a voice in the audience who's got some practical questions to ask that we need to get to.
Right.
And who will benefit by what we do.
CARD has done town hall meetings before.
You got that extra write-up because of the real estate question finally being aired.
Yeah,
that
there were
was-
actually
that was a little
3
extra ink,
articles
Just
for that one meeting.
Yeah.
4 counting.
I mean,
the
I don't know
one
how, I don't count on MLive for much, but I mean, it was generating.
Well,
free
don't
ink.
dismiss Ryan's stand.
No, not at all.
He
I
did-
just-
he did a
He's
good
very
job.
interested in this.
He is
He's got
very
a house.
interested.
He's got a house that's at ground zero. And he knows
Oh,
it.
yeah, oh,
He
yeah.
knows it. And he's very concerned, and I've talked to him on many occasions about what's going on. And he is very much interested in covering this issue, no question.
And he's-
asked a lot
I
of
just mean the
questions.
reach of it, does it really reach?
Well, the reach depends on how often people share that article.
Yeah.
But he's been the best reporter on this, by
Oh, yeah, by
far.
far, oh, by far.
I haven't had to correct him once on any article, which is amazing,
Yeah, it is.
considering
And he
how
does
complex
have
it is.
his limitations with, people who supervise him, what they're gonna allow to get printed.
But they've given quite a bit of.
They
He
give
gets a
free
lot of
interest.
free space.
Well,
He's got some
Yeah.
really big articles,
Yeah.
and I didn't think,
Well,
is
it's
it
a
really
big
that
issue.
big of an article?
I think it's an important issue.
But one of the things we could do as card members is share those
Yeah.
more. And
A lot of times
comment, write your comments.
A lot of times these meetings really restrict, like you said, they could have had more time for comment, for public comment. And a lot of these meetings, public comment is really tamped down in some ways. And, I've been involved in trying to open up some of these public meetings and been somewhat successful. But what they do is they shorten the time frame, so you can't get that many people. to make
Well,
comment.
I think anybody that talked more than 5 minutes.
Yeah.
I don't know if there was a one.
Yeah, there's several.
I talked for 5 minutes and 40 seconds, and I was the shortest one to talk.
You did a good job.
Of the panel.
But
Yeah, you
even
were-
the
you were the
questioners,
most
some of the
interesting.
questioners took more than 5 minutes.
Yeah.
I'm looking at 2 people in the room here.
Roger?
I'll time it.
I do a lot of threes, so I'm pretty sure I keep it short.
But it was good to get those issues out, but we do need more time. And one of the things we talked about doing, and maybe we can still do this at some point, would be to have like a monthly call-in show. CTN maybe combined with a podcast
Or quarterly.
or quarterly, but I don't know, quarterly, yeah. maybe
Does much
quarterly.
happen every month? I don't know.
Well,
There's
some
plenty of
months,
backstory though.
some months, I mean, almost need to do it ad hoc, so, because, by the time, if you just miss,
Yep.
you have your meeting and then something big happens the next week, you gotta wait another whole quarter to talk about it.
I guess. Well,
So we almost need like an on-call thing, so we can have a regular
scheduling.
meeting and then have another.
scheduling.
I mean, we talk about podcasts, you can do that.
Minutemen?
All you need is a studio space.
And Roger, you did a great job with that video. I mean, that was very well done.
Yeah,
And
well,
thank you for doing that.
Shanna, from our video group, she was taking the
Great
main
video.
camera, so she got good views.
Great job as a resource.
What?
I had some comments.
Oh, yes.
About what was talking about, the
Right.
agenda item. First of all, I thought, I'm just going to air my frustration with the way it was organized, poor organization, poor advance notice, so people didn't really know. And a poor choice of venue, because the room was so crowded. They could have done better by planning it out more in advance. It was a last minute haphazard effort, apparently.
Plus the hard stop at 9 o'clock.
Yeah.
I
By
was
design.
surprised at the level of intensity of the anger in the audience that was
Yeah.
expressed, particularly against the DEQ. I think it's fair, it's warranted, but I just, it kind of took me by surprise. I didn't expect that they were interrupting, a lot of people were rude. That all took me by surprise, and I guess that goes to the frustration that we're all experiencing. We've already partially talked about it, but I think we got to think about that for future town halls and there's got to be more freedom for people to ask questions. And the people who are speaking, not you, Roger, some of the others, they needed to be shorter. And some of them didn't have their facts straight.
Mhm.
And that would have been better if everyone knew what they were talking about when they spoke.
That happens with a complex site like this. And as long as the disinformation is,
No, I didn't mean in the
Correct.
public. I meant with the elected officials.
the elected officials, even more so, yeah.
So I was told that they did not want too many people on the panel, that there was actually pressure to keep the number to,
That's fine.
because like the mayor wasn't on the panel, council members, one as a moderator. So there was an attempt on their part, from what I understand, to try and make it more manageable, because there was a lot of people who wanted to be on the panel that obviously weren't, I guess, from what I was told. So, there was some forethought in that respect. I think it was poorly planned generally, though. I think it was, too quickly, set up and didn't have enough space. I don't know if this is all by design, it was a hard cutoff.
Yeah, maybe, but there were times when I thought there were too many people on the panel. We don't need to put panels up there.
Yeah.
It filled up with people.
Yeah, it was, my one camera could only get like 6 of the 8.
So who did organize the meeting? I don't want to spend a lot of
Yeah, who called
time on it.
it?
What's the
Okay,
point
here's what
of-
I was told, that the Yusuf and Adam Zemke and Donna were basically told by Debbie Dingle to come organize something
Okay.
at the last minute.
It was not at the last minute. They started in July planning this, and we talked about a lot of these things, different venue, longer period. Debbie was inflexible about her schedule, and because of that, we couldn't get the kind of venue that would allow the number of people that we wanted or the time frame that we wanted. So that
What
was
about City Hall,
unfortunate.
council chambers?
Smaller.
Is it smaller?
Smaller.
Right?
Much
Yeah.
When they redid it, they lost a third of their seats in there.
Does that
So,
imply that some of the political posturing by the state representatives was to make Debbie happy?
No, don't read it.
no,
that was,
I mean, it was.
I think her
I
schedule's
think
booked so far
Kevin's
on
point
time,
is
when
like
she's
it's-
coming through, they all want to.
It was badly organized, it was organized for the
Yeah.
wrong purpose, right?
Yeah.
It was not
Because they had-
organized
she had a
to
bunch of
create
stuff.
dialogue between the citizens and the decision makers. It was organized to give the elected officials an opportunity to, like, be seen on the issue. And that's,
That's worth something.
is it?
We need like Pioneers Auditorium.
Well, I think that's what I meant by posture.
yeah, but
Big, big show.
we were too close to school.
Oh, yeah.
It was bad.
But we learned, I think everybody learned, so I think it's going to be better.
And the image of a room like that overflowing, I never really got to my point because I kind of got riled up myself. But the
You got
idea-
riled up?
Oh, yeah, can you believe it? But you're in there for one thing and there's nobody there, and they make a big deal about it, and then you're in there for this thing and everybody's there, they can't even fit them in the room. There's so many people
It
care.
was jammed.
That's
And yet
kind
there's
of
no
a good
plan,
visual in
you
that
know?
respect. But on the
It was
other hand,
good,
if you
though. It
have
was
twice
good
as
that
big
there
a
was that
venue
many
and it's
people
just
there.
as crowded,
Yeah, like
It's even
Slauson
better.
was that day. That
Right.
was beyond.
there are people out the line.
Oh, yeah.
And even with their 10 o'clock stop or whatever that was, there
Yeah.
were people that did not get their questions answered. So this is a big deal that's going to be going on. And like you say, there's people that think this has been cleaned up, right? So there's an information gap between reality and perception out there, and you have to
Without
keep
getting off
addressing that.
the agenda, like, do you have, you have so many resources on this site. Is there something that if somebody had access to the schools, they could say, hey, and they could give little school assemblies on it? Is there a little program that somebody could run through the schools and say, hey, here's what's happening in your city, and it's an environmental issue?
It's a civics class.
Yeah, it's a civics issue.
It certainly
And
is.
Is there a, something
You know,
that
I
can-
wonder if Mary Morgan might
something
be,
canned?
you know, Mary Morgan with her
Oh, yeah.
CivTech,
Yeah.
or Civ City.
I just have I have a lot of access to the schools too, having kids in the schools.
Well, I used to go to schools and give little talks about this when, maybe once or twice a year, but it would be good to have something organized maybe under the auspices of CARD.
We need interns.
We need
To
free
put this
interns.
together.
Yeah.
If there was a PowerPoint or some kind of presentation, you could give a assembly link spiel and then answer some questions from the kids. It could be,
Yeah.
it might be some good
You know,
questions.
if you want to get really granular about it, then do a lesson plan on it and get some environmental science teachers to buy in and let the teachers do it for you.
Yep.
You put it together, the only group that you instruct are the teachers, and let them do a 2-week course on it with information, some quizzing, guest speakers. I mean,
You're giving them the resources with these
and let them
excellent
come in if
maps.
you want to, and then
Yeah.
that's what gets the kids to go home and talk to their mom and dad.
That's a standing offer I have to any teachers or administrators I run into, is that I have all this content, somebody needs to take and run with it.
So my daughter was at the School of Public Health, actually sat through a class for a quote-unquote expert and gave a hour-long lecture on 1,4 Dioxane and Gelman and completely screwed it up. She's like, I can't believe how terrible, because she knows it all, right?
Right,
She hears it around the table for the last 10 years.
right.
So she knew all the details. She said he was wrong from day, start to finish. And, did want to raise her hand and question this guy.
I didn't want to call them out.
But this was school public health, and so they are covering, I mean, they've opened up somewhat at school public health now that Philbert's going to provost, who used to be, cozy with Gilman and company. And so now the school public health has opened up somewhat, and so we may get some help. Rita's talking about putting in a grant to look at health effects in Scioto Township. She put in something before, and it didn't get funded, like a quick turnaround grant. But something on this agenda here, the responsible party, the last item on this, on 4. So there was something alluded to at the town hall about Gelman being spun off. And I went through the tape and kind of sporadically, I didn't have time to go through the whole thing. But I remember there was some comment about, I think it was from the DEQ, about Gelman's being,
Well, the letter of credit
yeah,
says that Gelman has, and this was from 3 years ago now, I think, $30 million over 30 years to do the cleanup. And there's a spreadsheet that supports, that figure. The problem is, it's just a spreadsheet based on no real mass
back
facts.
the napkin.
Because the thing I pointed out is that we really don't know how much mass is left. And
Right.
if you look at the trend lines for bringing the dioxane down, there's no way they can do this in 30 years. And what Mitch was saying is that, well, every 5 years they're going to reevaluate it. Well, then who do you go to? You go to the parent company and say, well, you're going to need another 5 years, another $5 million or $15 million. How's that going to work? They're going to voluntarily. So that the mechanism to take care of this for the life of the cleanup really isn't there. This 5-year review thing, who's to say Danaher isn't bought by somebody else in the meantime? Or
So is there a consensus now on if Danaher's the responsible party, or is it Gelman?
Well, Danaher bought the
Mm-hmm.
company that bought Gelman, so they're responsible. But they're saying, split Paul Life Sciences, take the productive part, the intellectual property that was created right here in Ann Arbor, pull that out, that's the moneymaker. Gelman Sciences gets the cleanup part, skeleton crew to do the
But
cleanup.
who's the responsible party?
I
In
think
that
the person
scenario.
who's named in the
Uh-huh.
consent, the person who's named in the consent judgment, that hasn't changed.
It hasn't changed at all.
Right.
Still Gelman Sciences.
Yeah.
But they can't spin off Gelman as a public entity, corporation, that then becomes responsible.
Well, it's
Is
just,
there Michigan law that would restrict that? That's my question,
I don't
because
know.
I think they'll do it if they can.
Well, that's what we were talking about when someone studied the corporate structure, and they have a history of creating a sub-ownership group, and then when they get stuck with something, they bankrupt it. They bankrupt they've done it in Australia. That's
Yeah, I don't
what
think that's gonna, I think.
That was the concern.
We're going down a rabbit hole here.
Yeah.
Gelman is listed as in the lawsuit. Paul is listed every once in a while too. I don't see them in the header, but when we do the reports, the name comes up. You know, whatever business relationship that, you know, Roger's described is still there. Somebody else is gonna buy it. You're not gonna lose the responsible party. Right now, it's Don or her or Paul has decided that name.
And we
shall-
did get confirmation, I don't know if it was at that meeting or the other meeting, about the parcels that were split, that, you know, Gelman, Danaher, Paul are still responsible for those split parcels. You know,
On the
where-
site.
The cleanup.
Yeah, for being, they have access to put wells in and do monitor and stuff like that. And of course, the vapor intrusion could be an issue there too. Yeah, I thought the meeting was contentious, and then part of that was maybe the heat and I think some of it was reaction to Mitch's bureaucrat talk. His 10-minute talk was 20 minutes, and he didn't really say much. And it was all, you know, jargon kind of things that, and I think that frustrates people because he's not really answering any questions.
He seems kind of blasé because he goes to work every day and does this.
Yeah.
And you can feel that.
Yeah,
Like he's,
and,
working.
you know, that's something you always have to deal with. As people move up in the organization, they get more and more like that because it's their job.
And then when somebody in the audience asked him a question later, he repeated what he
Right,
said.
right, and then they cut him off. It's, okay, we heard that already.
He's got his line, he goes to it.
Yeah, it's very true. So the transparency was another thing that we talked about. And again, even though you can't, the parties to the case can't say too much about things related to the case, there's a whole lot of other information and other people that can keep the public informed. And that's really, I see one of the major roles of CARD is to have accurate and up-to-date and complete information as much as we can. And try to twist the DEQ's arm to force the company to provide information about their dioxane in our waters of the state. And that's an angle I think we need to hammer home over and over again, is that, you know, this is not our dioxane, this is the company's dioxane, and it's our waters of the state. We should have all information there is about their dioxane in our waters of the state. We know that we're not getting all the information from the company because there's holes in the data that show up in their reports. They have data points in their cross sections and in their maps that aren't in their database. And to me, if you don't have all the facts in order, how are you going to really define what the problem is so you can solve it? Because the first step in solving a problem is to define what the problem is. So this is a later item on the agenda here. We talk about some of our concerns, and I'll get into that again later. Anybody else have any feedback on the?
If I may, for just a second, we've talked about it, but I see a common thought about getting the word out. We're talking about monthly, quarterly town hall meetings someplace. We've talked about, having science projects going through the grade school, which sounds good, but candidly, what's the real problem in this? I wouldn't even want to try and lecture a group of high school kids. They would miss it.
Just be
Now, if you want to talk about pollution, it's not a good idea to do Drano either. But that doesn't solve the problem. We need community involvement. I think the anger, the frustration that we all felt palpably at the town hall meeting will grow if the information gets out about holes in the data about, people will understand that if it's presented properly. I'm wondering, and we talked about, and I apologize to him, but I forget the reporter's name.
Ryan Stanton? Ryan Stanton.
Thank you. What I'm thinking, and I think it might have even been you, mentioned that he might have some editorial constraints.
I'm sure he does.
So the question is, does CARD or somebody need to sit down with the editors of M-Line? Not Ryan.
That's a good point.
He's
a reporter.
doing a great job, but frankly, he doesn't have the horsepower to do the job that's needed. And instead of worrying about town hall meetings and on and on and on, would M-Live, like as part of their civic responsibility, contribute a page to CARD once a month? Or what do they want to charge CARD to sell it? I mean, they sell advertising. They're in business to make money. So, but the point is, with Ryan's expertise as a reporter, with the frustration that I think this group understands, and the degree of detail that this group understands, especially, the shell games and that kind of stuff. Periodically, regularly, using the word periodically correctly, periodically, we just go live on M-Live. And a lot of people read it. I mean, there's a community TV station too for Ann Arbor. I don't know if it reaches into like Scioto Township, but it's on cable, and part of their charter is serving community needs.
Yeah.
I think with a little bit of leverage, I won't say muscle, but with a little bit of leverage, I think we at least ought to try to engage the mass media, get away from even a one-pager from Orion is, yeah, but how about one pager once a month? This is what's happened in the last month. And then be a little more candid and perhaps a little less polite than we sometimes are. DEQ is being less than forthright. Because it's not news, we can inject a certain amount of editorial comment with responsibility.
Yeah,
and that's where you need the editors of the newspaper.
It's really important that we really stick to the facts, but some of the facts will point to the DEQ's shortcomings.
Oh, I disagree. I'm sorry, I disagree.
You disagree that we should not stick to the facts?
No, that's not what I mean. I mean, I disagree that we can't help people draw conclusions to the facts.
Yeah, but we actually have quite a reach in social media, not as much as we should have. But like we don't really have we're not active on Facebook. We have a Facebook page that points to websites. We're on Twitter.
But if I go to my email provider and click on online news, I do not get Facebook.
Well,
I have to go looking. If I know something exists, first I have to know it.
Facebook isn't the most reliable news source, for one thing.
Well, I used the city. I commented at the meeting the other day. Once as an experiment, I went into the City of Ann Arbor website and tried to find Dioxane. I did find it 5 minutes later. It was so buried. They've got a section in there on water quality and Ann Arbor City water. It's not in there.
So
It's buried
The
someplace
city's
else.
timeline ends in 2004.
Well, that
That
is,
one.
they haven't updated, and this is another issue that I've been working on lately. SRSW, Reservoir Safe Water, has this website, which has a lot of stuff on it, including links to all the other stakeholder websites. But if you like go to the county website, the card site's there. It has links to other websites. And you go to the city, it has some content, some of it's old.
But is there?
But they don't, you can't go to one place and get all the information.
My point exactly.
And,
Well, CARD was talking about doing a
And those are municipal
Right.
sites.
well, CARD has,
At some point.
CARD has a website through the county.
But
But
there's
it's-
not even a link in the Ann
Well, we
Arbor
had talked
webpage
about,
to take you to the card.
Well, actually, there is.
Yeah,
But
because
you
There
gotta
is
find
a
it.
card?
well,
Well,
Yeah,
my,
yeah.
again,
That's how
my
I-
point.
so I don't think we're gonna solve this
Petition.
tonight,
Well,
but I
yeah.
think the point is really well made, and the county has sufficient resources to support CARD in designing a strategy and making that happen. So I can take that back to the budget folks up at administration and make sure that you guys are afforded a budget to do the kind of communications you think would be most effective and appropriate for this.
But if we went, look, just to keep this idea alive for a second, and then I promise to be quiet. Well, I almost. At the county level, who calls and asks for an appointment with the editor of MLive? Or the publishers?
Well, really, we defer to Evan on this issue, so like, what is Water
I'm not
Resources
sure what your
Commissioner?
question is.
Well, I
If
think
we was-
you're asking, you want us to have a meeting with the editors of MLive. And
Well,
I
what
could
I'm
say
asking
that
is-
I've met with the previous editors of Ann Arbor News and, the previous, so it's probably about time we do that again, and I can set that up through.
I think there are none here, Roger.
And I would
think it's all
suggest
in
that
Grand
at least
Rapids. We have
MLive was a halfway
There's no structure.
That
really
They
took that
left.
office.
They left, they're gone.
Yeah, they had like, I mean, in the last year, there's been like
Yeah,
13
they're
people
gone.
at that office. It's-
Well, what is
It's a
MLive?
shell.
It's in Grand Rapids, it's essentially in Grand Rapids.
It's fine. I got a 7-passenger van.
Actually, I
Let's go to
think
Grand
there's an
Rapids.
angle here
It's on me.
there's an angle there we need to pursue, because our legislators are all on board with this. They understand what the problem is with the state.
Well, let's get Yusef
So,
and,
let me finish. So, we really do need to reach out to other parts of the state and say, Ann Arbor's like the tech hub of Michigan right now. It's got the world-class university, a lot of the intellectual properties coming out of here.
autonomous cars.
And this is a statewide issue, how we take care. If we here in Ann Arbor can't get the right kind of cleanup
Yeah.
with all of our resources and know-how and involve citizens who come to meetings and pack the halls, what hope is there for the other parts of the state, like Antrim County that's dealing with the Tar Lake thing that's spreading to
we
Shannon
just
Creek?
had that thing pop up in Grayling and Mansalona.
Yeah, it didn't just pop up. It took years. And, this is the kind of
But
thing
it's
that's,
finally getting some,
it's getting some
exposure.
notice. Thank you, Flint Water Crisis, just like us. But I still think the people, outstate people, don't really understand the importance of having good environmental protection legislation. Because Michigan is water. One of the things I was going to ask some of the new people to do was to go through and list all of the names of the cities and townships that have water-related names. And then send that to all the representatives throughout the state and point out Michigan is water. It's literally defined by 1/5 of the world's fresh surface water, the shape of Michigan.
I don't think the state will sign up to that. You're not gonna get support.
That includes
Okay, if you're gonna
cities
go into
that-
that fatalistic attitude,
You know.
we're not gonna get anywhere.
No. Please
But
don't
truly,
listen.
we're all just 2/3 water, and as soon as we convince people that, you know, water is Michigan's future. It was the winter wonderland, you know.
Used to be on the plates.
Now it's pure Michigan, but we gotta say, we have to use pure Michigan as the goal, the ideal goal to shoot for, not just a slogan. Because you can't just put a whitewash on these kind of problems and expect people to, you know,
Sure you can.
So speaking of local resources and bringing pressure to bear, why is U of M not going?
that's one of the key
Going
things we
crazy
have to
about
get
all
through.
this.
Gelman gave the school of public health.
Yeah, but that's not,
Well,
that's,
that had
that's
a-
only part of it.
But I'm just saying, he gave the school of public health money, and then he hired some of the faculty as consultants. And it was told to me by someone who I won't repeat the name of, that when you would go to meetings and Gelman was with his professors were like lapdogs to Charles Gelman. Because he would pay them to basically muddy the waters. So there was this, you know, he was very easily infiltrated into the U of M with money. And the word was, don't mess with the money from on high at U of M. So now Martin Filbert's out. He was the dean, and he was part of that, in my opinion. And now Gelman is pretty close to, you know, he's pretty far along. He's not going to be around much longer, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So there is an opening coming, and I think some of the faculty feel a little bit more free to do more. And some of these guys I've talked to at School of Public Health are very interested in vapor intrusion. They're like world experts in vapor intrusion.
This really should be
An issue for them.
the America's, we should be the central site to study dioxane and how to clean it up.
That's the point I've made before.
And we just not hammer that home, because we're going to be stuck with this for decades.
No, for 200 years.
Or,
I just wondered if they didn't care because they can afford to hook up to Detroit Water or something, like they're just.
but you still have
They're
vapor
still- it
intrusion
doesn't bother.
issues.
The
You
problem-
still have
understand.
vapor intrusion
Oh, I know.
issues to deal with.
I mean, that's coming up right now in my neighborhood where they're pushing that lower town. And they have the ion barrier on the outflow, and then they have the vapor
Right.
intrusion for the buildings in.
Yeah.
People don't really like the feeling that they're in this bathtub of pollution, you know? I don't think it's gonna be good for their business over there. The more
Yeah.
that they're tamping down that aspect of
Well,
the
the
brownfield planning.
U of M has to worry about people wanting to send their kids here,
Yeah,
and that's a big issue for them.
seems
And
like a
they-
big lever.
You know, I think the more articles that get in the paper, the more concerned they're going to be about it. Because a lot of parents will look at that and will be concerned. And they may not want to send them, because the kids all can't live on campus, you know.
They're
So,
all living in converted the converted housing apartments in this town is huge.
Yep.
And some of those buildings are
junk, you know.
80, 90, perhaps even 100 years old.
My kids were in them.
And vapor intrusion is a serious part of it.
Depends on what value they end up using for vapor intrusion. They're talking 1900, because EPA, quote unquote, would indicate that.
So how do we get the university more involved? That's something everybody can
I'm
think
working
about
on it partly, you know.
before the next meeting, maybe. Actually,
Is it too early to involve the university?
I should talk to Schlissel.
Well, he says he wants the university involved in local issues, and that's not been the mantra of the university. Everything was, let's go to Africa, let's go to wherever, you know, let's go to Mars and do work. You know, Michigan and Ann Arbor is passé. And there is a lot of that at the university, and I think there is, you know, Schlissel has said that he wants to make a change in that regard. Some of the faculty I've talked to are very interested in this, you know, but they're wondering if they can get funding with the Trump administration. Although EPA seems to be interested in funding it, so does NIEHS, National Institutes of Environmental Health.
Well, Trump's just you know, in the timescale of the cleanup, Trump is a blip.
EPA says that this could be cleaned up fairly quickly.
Well, if you dewater the west side of Ann Arbor.
Well, if you treat and pump, and pump and treat.
Yeah, but
I'm
you can
skeptical
control it rather quickly, but there's no way they're gonna clean it up rather quickly.
Well,
The,
That's what I'm told by, you know,
Well-
people who are involved in the EPA effort.
yeah, but
They told you it can be
Clean this up to drinkable standard.
No,
That's
they,
what-
I
that's
thought
what
you
Mitch
In
said
a
they
relatively
said
quick fashion,
that they said it.
and at
could
about
be
$50
done.
million.
That's
which
what
is
Mitch
we'll get
Edelman
to in a little
said.
bit here.
I'm skeptical of the university's.
This was EPA's comments as well.
I understand,
as some
but
other-
the university went through, is still going through the Flint lead problem, and I haven't heard a word. I went to a water
I mean, from
ceremony
U
up
of M Flint.
precisely, but it's the same University of Michigan. And nobody's running around worrying about students not going to the U of M Flint. U of M isn't particularly worried about it.
yeah, they're still overwhelmed with applications because it is a world-class university.
But not to
Well,
Flint, though.
but my point is, if they can slide through Flint, they're not gonna blink an eye at Dioxane.
Well, I'm about as cynical as they come about this stuff, but I think that the university, I think we can write off the idea that Gelman bought off the U of M to keep them out of this, because my contacts in the alumni relations group say, no way. He just hasn't given that much money.
Right.
The problem
It
with the
just doesn't mean
university.
that much to them.
Yeah, they're not tearing down the
They are
public
not.
health and building.
They're not, I mean, because I do that stuff, and they're not, they didn't call me to cast as black, you
Right.
know?
You know, the
We
university
need
is,
to move on, I
Yeah.
think, right,
Yeah.
to number 5?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do that. So we've actually been talking about this a little bit. So the near surface exposure, this was really your baby.
so yeah, I was, like I said before, I was kind of taken aback by the DEQ's comments, but I'll let that go because they're gonna do tests and I'm fine with, you know, as long as they're gonna do the tests, it's fine.
Have they told you like a schedule of that or location?
They keep juggling it around. I think they're not interested in doing near surface water tests. That wasn't on their game plan, but they're doing it, so that's fine. I'm surprised the city of Ann Arbor has added it to their court case as well as vapor intrusion. And what was the other thing they added? That
Not
was-
as long as the city council is controlled by the downtown development association.
So they included Seeps and Barton in the city's own deposition, which is pretty surprising, because they've been been kind of pushing back on Seeps and Barton, saying it's not that, it's not as big a deal as you make it out. So it's in their deposition, which I think is great. But I think the Seeps issue, we need to just keep pressuring them. I think that, for example, they did Hannah Park, and that's one of the ravines I was into. The Hannah Park doesn't have a creek in it. The creek is in a concrete pipe.
Where's Hannah Park?
I got a picture of it. Where's Hannah Park? So Hannah Park is up in here.
That's the one that falls out.
Maryfield here.
Yeah.
So it's right in here. Here's a ravine that runs along here.
Okay.
This is the park itself, I think. Let's see. So here's part of the ravine here.
That's not the old Allen Creek?
Yeah, it's the old Allen's Creek.
Oh, okay.
So would be great to daylight at some point. Anyway, so I was down at Hannah Park and there's no creek, but they said they did tests there and it's non-detect. There's nothing, they tested just runoff from the hillside is what they tested, which is worthless. Same thing at West Park, they tested the pond at West Park. West Park, I helped design West Park stormwater. I mean,
So you're saying they
I
gotta
pushed
go
the city.
deeper at West Park
pardon?
for the surface water?
Well, not
That wasn't
necessarily
about-
deeper elsewhere, right?
It's what?
Not deeper, but elsewhere, because that stormwater is kind of contained, isn't it?
Well, the water for the pond that they tested is off 7th and off the park itself. It doesn't have anything to do with the creek, doesn't have anything to do with groundwater,
It's
in
all
my
surface water.
humble opinion. So that test, so those two tests really were worthless. It would be nice, and I made this point, it'd be nice if they had contacted, say, the Allen's Creek Watershed Group, which I'm involved in, or even the CARD Group, as far as, sites where they were gonna do testing. Because those two tests were a waste of time, and they shouldn't have done them, and I don't know why they did them,
I don't know why.
Well, because they expected the data to come back zero.
Well,
So they can-
getting the data from the
They can
DEQ
say-
is
they can get it
sometimes
back.
problematic. These are the data we got from
He did kind of make a point.
their temporary borings, but I don't recall getting any data sets from this last round of tests where they did surface water testing. And maybe it's because Dan's been out with his hip replacement. So
Well, actually, Kevin Lunt came and actually did, to their credit, they came out and tested the Ellis Creek, which I kind of wondered if there'd be,
So did you get the results from that?
yeah, non-detect.
All right, so what form were those results? Were they just pages, sheets of
They
paper?
basically took a spreadsheet and pasted it into an email and sent it to me.
Okay, so did that come through the repository at all?
I don't know if they sent it to that or not.
See, this is the kind of thing that we need to have
A
the
central-
information that the
central
state
location.
has
Yeah.
sent to us just as much as the information that Paul has.
Well, I don't know if Jennifer
Sent to
Kahn
us.
got those information or not.
Yeah.
I kind of assumed she did, but I guess I should read.
Because one of my goals is to get all of the sampling in one database and be able to spit it off by whether it's deep or
So
shallow.
they said they would do a test, and I think an important test is going to be at West Park where you have the pipe coming into the park is capturing a lot of groundwater
Right.
upstream of, it's just inside of 7th
Right.
Street. So just upstream of that, there's a lot of contamination.
Right.
They said they would test that site, and they said the city is not working with us. I went to the city and I asked Jennifer Lawson, she said, hell no, I do it, we'll do it, no problem. I'm totally willing to do it. So they said they would do it, the city said they would do it, so we should pressure them. I think that's gonna be a valuable piece of data because during a drought, you can stand on the grate where the water's running and you'll hear water gushing through there. And a former deputy drain commissioner told me that when they put in that pipe, they tapped into a lot of seeps to reduce the undermining of the roadway, undermining of foundations. So it's capturing a lot of groundwater.
So Vince is talking about here at West Park.
Just
right
across
here,
the street.
Right
Yeah.
here, right?
But that's the one that, they left that lot empty in Maple Ridge, right?
It's across the street.
Yeah,
Right.
behind Seven.
So
West
that's-
of Seven.
But the place they can test is right at West Park. When you go,
Here's West Park.
here's the entrance, is it here?
Here's the big
This one
entrance
is
up
it.
here. Here's the band shell.
So there's an entrance coming off of,
Oh, it's
here,
just
Willow
Yeah,
There's one here.
and that. So
yeah.
this is the one here. So they have a great, they put in swirl concentrators, big, huge containers that captured a lot of debris. We pressured them to do that. And it blew off, the first big storm. So they decided to put in grates on top so the water would come up the top and just spill out if it has to. So you can stand on top of the grate and you can just hear the water gushing through there, even in a drought. So it's capturing a lot of groundwater. So I would love for them to test that. I think that would be really indicative of what's going on just upstream. And it's an easy test. They said, if we have a stick, I could just take my stick, put a little capture thing on it, drop it in the water, pull it out, I'm done. So it's quick and dirty. They just need to get the city to open the grate up and make sure they put it back, put it back together right. So that's one of the things I would like to see done.
That's ours.
They said they'd do it, so.
I'm not sure if that's a county drain or a
What?
city drain.
It's ours.
For my own
That's a county drain,
information,
but the city is in charge of I think the maintenance of the swirl concentrator, because they have to come out once in a while and get all the crud that gets captured.
They have the equipment, so that would make sense.
So they have like a vac,
Yeah.
super vac that goes in and backs it out. So, I mean, Jennifer Lawson was, hey, that's fine, let's do it, I have no problem with that. And she's the stormwater manager, one of them,
what lab is it that all of these samples get sent to?
DEQ's lab.
They all
And they
go to
split
Lansing?
samples, they occasionally split sample,
DEQ.
yeah, pretty sure.
Is there any private labs in the state that
Yeah.
anybody will
There's
sign up
one in
to?
town now.
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
There's one in town now, the text down at 0.3 part per million.
What's, I'm just out of
It's
curiosity.
Ann Arbor, what is it?
Ann Arbor Testing Service.
Testing service.
There's a couple others, but the ones that, to get really down below 1 part per billion, you have to send that out of state, and that's another issue.
No, no, in town here, they're doing 0.3 part per million.
Are they really? No?
They're doing
That wasn't true a few months ago.
Well, they told, at the Issues and L's, the guy who runs the lab, who owns it, sat in front of me, and we got to talking, and he said, yeah, we're testing down to 1 part per billion, and we have it set up now where we're gonna be down to 0.3 part per billion.
That's the Ann Arbor testing,
I think that's it.
Yeah,
That's the line.
verify that for Vince.
because, Roger, like I mentioned at the town hall, having lived in Ann Arbor my whole life, grown up within a couple of blocks of West Park, and currently live over near Zion Lutheran Church. There's water in this town that nobody's even talking about, that I've seen, that I've played in. Okay? Allen Creek for sure. You and I, after one of the meetings here, we talked about, and everybody assumes water's gonna run downhill, but in fact, I know of 3 12-month seeps that are wet year-round, that are in Eberwhite Woods,
Yeah.
which is uphill.
Yeah, well, okay, we can get into the whole hydrology, but some of that's perched water, but what you're right in that there's varied conditions where the surface drops away and whatever water's up here will seep out, even if it's not close to the river.
So yeah, seeps all over the place.
Yeah.
It seeps in Worcester Park, which is.
So that point's well taken.
So when you talk about the prohibition zone, like it's the next little bullet,
Yep.
and this is, I don't know if it's a legal question or what, but the prohibition zone is a surveyed line that's on the map, and they say the idea is that we keep people from coming into contact with this,
Yep.
Well, it's not
inside
that-
or outside of this two-dimensional line?
It's not to keep people in contact through vapor intrusion or water in the basement, it's to keep anybody from having wells in these areas.
In this, you're prohibited from having a well, that's
Right.
why they closed the municipal wells, right?
So when
Right.
did that happen? When did that law come in that you're prohibited from having a well? in
It's-
your
It
area?
wasn't a law, it was part of the lawsuit.
That was part of
But
that
what year?
agreement.
It was what
Judge decided.
Judge Shelton decided that was a remedy that was going to be imposed.
It was, the first one was around 2004, was it? And then they expanded it a few years later to this pink area.
But
up here.
that's what the meaning of that prohibition zone is.
Yeah.
You got to know.
Prohibited from
The
drilling. a new well.
groundwater use prohibition zones, you're prohibited from using the groundwater.
So the question is this violating the prohibition
Yeah,
zone?
is it a three-dimensional
If
line,
this
you know?
compound is coming up into the surface, because we're finding it now, it's lost.
I know, I see that.
And I think that's an important question. I don't know, maybe the legal people in the room, legal person.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
I
is
have-
it two-dimensional or three-dimensional? If that water's popping up out of the ground all of a sudden, and
Right,
you
so
have
it's
no,
not being pumped.
But that's not a well.
Artesian wells.
No,
All this is saying is you cannot have wells.
that's what the
drinking water
definition
wells.
of
Now,
that, that's what's
Well,
prohibited.
but this
Even
is
non-recirculating
It was all
heat
based
pumps.
on the
Part
theory,
201.
it was based on the theory that they could let the water run and it would run to the river and
They're isolated.
and be somebody else's problem downstream.
So what's being prohibited is me from drilling a well if I live inside this range.
Correct.
Right.
Yes.
Well, I'm
That's
not
all.
sure that's true, because Part 201 has specific language about allowing municipalities and companies to isolate the compound. Very weak. You know, we used to have a cleanup standard. Now we have an isolation standard. And I think the prohibition zone is based on Part 201, and that's my question. And that's, I think
Yeah,
that's what
that's
you're
what we're-
alluding to.
yeah, same
Does
here.
Part 201 indicate that this is in violation of the state standard? Because now it's coming to the surface and exposing people to the compound.
May I?
Now, it may not be at a toxic level that we're aware of now, but I don't know if that matters. I don't know if that really matters, if it's still exposing people, because when you pumped it out of the
Well, are
ground,
the people drinking it?
they're
Are they
breathing
bathing
it.
in
They're
it?
probably breathing it. Now Larry
So now we're
Lemke,
back talking about vapor intrusion.
well, Larry Lemke said it's probably in the creeks, it's probably in the river, probably in basements. I had my cousin come into town from Portland, who's a geologist and does this for a living in the East Coast. He finds water sources for towns that have lost their water due to contaminations, or whether they can clean up the contamination. He said, yeah, this looks like to me like, you know, you're soaked, you know, this is going every which way. He said, it bifurcating towards Barton looks like, you know, the geology would indicate that. So I think there's, you know, and then we have the geologist from MSU saying,
So what's your point?
well, that it's coming to the surface, it's exposing people, it's a vapor intrusion issue. The only question I have is, does it have to meet a toxicological standard? I mean, if it's a 2 part per billion, can they say, no big deal, that's non-toxic for vapor intrusion? I don't know if Part 201 allows that.
Well, we can find out. Let's move on. Conan, I think you're up.
So we've had a lot of conversation about full remediation, and the cost of that is indeterminate. So I think the county should start digging in and helping to figure out like what is the real cost of full remediation in advance of either Superfund and CERCLA or something worse happening at DEQ rather than letting the pollution continue. Whether that sort of is ultimately public financing for the cleanup or some other way to squeeze the responsible party to get the amount that we actually need, I don't know. But I think it would behoove us to have that information created defensively. It would also be useful, frankly, in our litigation.
So you say hire somebody to calculate what it would cost to clean this up?
You put together, yeah.
And the ultimate option would be, not that it would happen, but one option would be that the county could bond out
Yeah.
whatever million, 10 million, 50 million.
Well, you know, this kind of analysis has been done.
Is that the 03?
No?
More
Back in
recently?
1990.
Oh, no, less recently.
Just adjust for inflation.
When the 64,000 pounds was calculated, it was gonna cost $44 million to treat it down to 3 parts per billion. So what do you think $1990 is today?
Yeah. okay.
And that's before they acknowledge the whole deep plume,
How much was that?
$44 million. And the company, you know, Chuck Gelman's share was only $46 million. So,
Yeah, so my question really is to you guys, do you think having that kind of background research would be useful sort of strategically, both in terms of...
How much do you think that would cost?
I don't know. I don't know anything about it. I mean, you know, my strength here is finding money and power for you guys, not actually knowing anything about anything.
I'm just wondering if someone had mentioned
Does
it.
that become
You mean
an
to
argument?
have somebody's
Do
part-time
a study.
staff
I'm
study?
saying, trying to get money that doesn't come out of the local municipalities?
Well, I'm just saying the county could fund an effort to determine what the cleanup would cost at this point and how long it would take. And then we would have that as information and ammunition potentially. I don't know how much that would cost. If that's like a $4 million effort, is it worth it?
well, first of all, don't you think the company has calculated this out?
Well, you gotta get it from them.
Because they have to tell their stockholders.
Yeah, they have to have it
Well,
on
that's a
their
good
sheet.
point.
And their cost estimate is $1 million a year for 28 more years.
Was that to 85 parts or?
That was to 85. So, and the state let them negotiate that. Instead of saying it's gonna be 7.2.
Well, what they actually calculated was putting on a show of cleaning up for 30 years and then leave.
Right.
Whereas if you extrapolate that out for 200 years, that's $200 million. And my guess, if you look at how it has expanded while they've been spending $1 or $2 million a year, well, that is going to take another 200 years, and it's still going to be expanding, but it'll be pretty dilute by then, and
The question is, can we keep it from getting into more people's wells and the city water supply soon enough,
And vapor intrusion.
if it's heading that way?
Well, and the fact, when I first got involved in this only 13 years ago,
Yeah.
there wasn't even public buy-in. That was when the cleanup solution involved piping it back for,
Right.
yeah, and every resident
Right,
went up and furious.
They didn't want a pipeline in their
You can't do
neighborhood.
that.
right.
They didn't want the pipes through their
And that-
neighborhood.
Yeah.
Right.
Right?
They- well,
The property
what the
values will
chemical
go
brought
down,
up,
nobody
they-
will live there. I mean, there was no buy-in for it, and essentially was shut down. That discussion quit.
Well, that's why Sheldon decided for Prohibition Zone. He saw the
It may
writing.
have- I don't know why, but that could have been.
Well-
I think that was it. He saw the public opinion was against it, and he said, okay, screw it, we'll do a Prohibition Zone.
What
The
really
state- the
happened
state
there was
allowed it.
that people didn't want to have their neighborhood destroyed
Right.
on a failed cleanup like happened at Evergreen. You know, they weren't cleaning up at Evergreen, so why use that same failed approach to try to clean up what was the E-plume.
So one thing
What we
about-
really wanted was, with the Prohibition Zone, was, okay, 2,800 parts per billion here, 85 parts per billion here. The huge mass of dioxane that left the site was not attacked. This major part here in the middle, they still are not going after the major contamination here, nor at their core, even on their own property.
At 2 million part per billion.
Yeah,
Well-
the only thing I'm trying to say is that in terms of the cleanup, to say what cleanup is not a simple question to begin with.
Right.
There's so many different
I wonder if
parameters.
the
about
EPA
what
would
it
help
is.
us with this at all. 'Cause
Well,
must
if they get involved, they
might.
might.
No,
I mean, that
even
comes-
before they're involved, they might actually be doing this right now, making a determination before they even decide on Superfund. So we could talk to Burkhoff and see if he would provide us some information on what he estimates or what they estimate the cost would be, and
That's a possibility.
Conan, within the discretional budget of the county, that, is there someone on staff that could make some of these calls and dig into some of the
County board would decide.
EPA and, that's what I'm saying. Like, what would we want from that? Would it be somebody to put together a cost and a plan of action? If we said, hey, we got a blank check, well, we don't, but if we had a blank check to clean this up to a standard that we could agree upon, like to focus on their property or whatever was the best focus for the most amount of people, you know, what would the county do? Like, what would you do? Like, would you have you'd set a staff person to doing that or
So
coordinating?
what I would prefer to do is resource card to make that research happen, so that there is guidance from our experts here at this table to make sure that the right people are doing it, they're asking the right questions, they're scoping it in the right way. I don't know, Jeff,
Yeah, I just
about
wondered.
that. And I don't know if we have the staff capacity, I would
Yeah,
guess.
I would think so.
They're out
We have
playing
no
the
money,
game.
no capacity, and Jenny's going on maternity leave any day.
Yeah.
You're gonna have a cookie.
And I think Ellen's shop is similarly situated,
Yeah.
so.
Right.
So Conan, could there be a resolution to actually bond or not, or just pay for a study to determine what the county could do or what the community could do on its own if they wanted to?
Mhm.
Do you think that would pass?
So our budget is going to be presented in probably mid-October, our 2018 budget. You know, you've got 3 commissioners from the city of Ann Arbor. You've got Kent Martinez-Kratz and Michelle Dietrich. So I think there are, I mean, if CARD wanted it and CARD felt like that would be a useful tool, I think there are 5 commissioners who would back that play.
Up to what dollar amount?
I don't know. I
5
mean,
million?
yeah, not in the millions, right? I don't think that's doable for us,
3 million?
but.
But
no,
this
not
is
in
a
the-
study to try to get a handle on what it would really cost. And then maybe you could take that to court.
I mean, if you had a staff
And
person
use it as
for
evidence
6
for
months,
that.
that'd be
I got a few
60
general
grand or
comments
something,
on this.
I don't know.
You know?
Go ahead, Kathy.
Well, there are other people talking still,
No,
so
that's
I'll
all.
wait. Right now, we've got the intervenor settlement negotiations going on actively. And we have the appeal to the Michigan Supreme Court. And we have the EPA action, you know, Ann Arbor Township, the Sierra Club, and Scioto Township are actively involved with the EPA review for consideration of listing this in the national priorities list. We have a lot of different cards in play right now. And all along, we've said the polluter should pay. All along, the pressure has been on Gelman to pay. We've had multiple meetings. There's this municipal and agency meeting. County Commission has been represented at that meeting. Mike Moran's been there, Bryce has been there, I've been there, County's been there. At that meeting, at those meetings, the consensus has always been the polluter should pay. And it just seems like something like this could go off on a tangent and undermine potentially some of the things that are actively going forward right now. That this might not be the time for this, and some things are going on right now that You know, I just think it's ill-timed, that it doesn't make sense.
Unless, of
To
course,
come up with that info privately would be okay, but you mean to make it a county, like we're asking
How are you gonna-
taxpayers for a little.
Yeah, I don't think the taxpayers should have to pay for this.
It's a bad precedent
I agree with that.
when you're talking about a long term. You know, because then you're actually taking on some of the liability. What
It's
if the
hard.
cleanup doesn't work?
It's
And
hard to clean poverty,
defining
you know.
cleanup is not gonna be, I mean, it's not gonna be a simple thing now. They're all different methods, all different levels, you know, it's like, that isn't a simple question.
well,
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not, you know, I was maybe a little flip about the level of my involvement and knowledge about this, right? I've been doing it for 20 years. So I'm keenly aware of those limitations. We have a budget opportunity at the county, and there is an information gap that keeps coming up in our public meetings about what does it cost to clean this up. We have an opportunity to fill that information gap. That information gap is also useful potentially if Superfund is the direction that we decide to go. Because different from Michigan statute, with CERCLA, we can publicly fund the cleanup while we go after the polluter still. So if Superfund and CERCLA are the route, which, I mean, that's my personal preferred option anyway, then it's not backing away from our polluter pay consensus, which I still hope is like what we get to happen and expect. But I'm also not trying to push something on you guys that you don't want. I'm offering a resource.
Appreciate that.
I think we understand that. What, is there and this should be something that would not have to be private, is there a court order that is holding off discovery pending decisions on such things such as whether the interveners can participate?
There's no discovery going on right now.
I know there isn't. That's what I'm saying,
There's no
because
what?
one of the things that's obvious and seemed easy, as Roger was saying, they have to have those numbers, and it's not hard to ask if discovery can be initiated.
There's no discovery going on right now.
Right, which is why there's an appeal, because then there's no discovery while there's an appeal, among other things, yeah, so.
That may be the plan. One issue I have is that if Gelman does spin off, or Donaher spins off Gelman, then EPA is really going to be not a solution, because the EPA is not going to fund this independently of the responsible party.
No, there's responsible parties.
No, unless if Gelman's by themselves, they're not going to have the money.
But that's
to go
30
away.
years from now.
I'm talking about tomorrow, when they start to clean up
So
tomorrow.
tomorrow, Gelman is still part of Denner.
Well, unless they're spinning them off.
But they can't spin off the liability.
Well,
Yes, you
that's
can.
the debate.
Well, no, you spin off the company and when the company declares bankruptcy.
But
I think that was your point
But they
earlier.
have a,
That's my fear, and that's one of the things I wanted to pursue this idea, because EPA may, if there's a responsible party, I think EPA is a viable option. If there is no responsible party, EPA doesn't have any money to do it by themselves anymore. They just don't have the money. So those kind of projects are not being done in Superfund anymore, or very rarely when there's a super bad situation. So if there's a responsible party, Pruitt is totally behind EPA going after the responsible parties. There's a Washington Post article on that he's interviewed and states that clearly. I talked to Debbie Stabenow at the Sierra Club 50-year event that was a couple of months ago. I asked her point blank about it. She said, yeah, if there's a responsible party, that is a real solution. If there is no responsible party, EPA is very short on funds. So the county, is something that would be interesting to pursue as a fallback, in my opinion. I would prefer EPA, but it's hard to know for me if Gelman's going to be spun off or not. And that's why I was asking, does anybody have any insight on that?
And we may not know the answer to that
Nobody
question
knows.
at this time.
Yeah. But it's a definite possibility, in my opinion.
we need to revisit the state agreement that they have
Yeah.
for 30 years.
There's an agreement for 30 years that has that money in a commitment, so I think that's their period, that money. Now, if it goes above
And
and
that's
beyond
30
that,
million?
or
Is that how
longer,
much they have,
that's
30
my
million?
understanding, yes.
Yeah.
Who is holding that money? I mean, Roger was mentioning earlier, there's not much accountability, but is somebody sitting on a $30 million?
I don't know how that works.
It's in my
No, it's
bank.
with a bank or something?
No, I don't, it's a.
That's something we could look into.
It's
I
probably,
mean,
Or something.
it's
Where is it?
It's
Not
probably an
not
escrow
cash
somewhere.
buried in the backyard, but where's the paper?
Mike, what were you were saying is that just ask the judge to get Gelman's private estimate?
That's, in short, yes, there's a a time in litigation called the discovery period, essentially, when questions can be asked and answers forced, but where you've got, who's gonna ask? The DEQ's not gonna ask, because we've been asking them to do that for a long time. So that leaves the interveners, and by challenging the interveners have no power to engage in discovery, essentially, so that's probably the.
So the
major
discovery's
reason.
gonna hold off until
Until there are parties who are gonna do it, because the DEQ's not
until
gonna
the
do it.
Supreme Court case is
Mm-hmm.
settled, and how long is that gonna take?
I don't know,
We talking months,
months to a year or so.
months to a year?
Yeah.
So it's basically on hold for a year to get any information.
Well, hopefully.
Well,
not a
it could
year.
be, you know,
Hopefully
it's hard
not.
to say, I mean, it could be expedited, but it's hard to know.
well, the
whether-
Supreme Court is mostly Republican at this point, so I'm not sure they're gonna wanna settle anything quickly, especially on this, with Flint looming behind them.
What's the best case? So they decline to hear the case?
That would be wonderful.
Is that, then it's settled right there?
Yeah, then you move
The other
on.
thing is hear it right away, expedited, and vote the proper way.
Mhm.
So would we be interested in the county even discussing this amongst themselves, you know, what options are for a evaluation of what the problem we're in, to put a dollar amount and some kind of a plan that has some viability to it, so we have that at least as information we could provide to court, provide to EPA, provide to whoever.
Or boosting IT resources, so you can have that common database that I keep
Or you
hearing
can
about,
provide
where
to
there's gaps in.
ourselves as a
in
measure
data.
of how worse can be in worst case.
I mean, I think it may be worth doing. And we have to find a consultant who's willing to do it accurately and reasonably, and not be an insider who gets a contract. That would be my fear. But I think it might be worth doing. I think it'd be very valuable information. And I guess, we could contact EPA and see if they have things they could prevent or provide us.
I think
It's
going
what
through
I
the
do
EPA
first.
might be.
Yeah, it may exist.
I would do that first.
Yeah.
Has anybody done that?
Look, the
Did the counties-
EPA might have funds. We don't even have to spend local funds.
Did the county, what was the county's position on petitioning the EPA for review?
We're supportive. We asked,
There's a three-pronged approach, so it was, kind of pursue all avenues, and I think it was the.
But they didn't join in.
third.
They didn't join, no, they didn't pass a resolution. It was a draft that never got passed, from what I understand.
right, but we authorized the Water Resources Commissioner to speak on our behalf.
Right, so I think it was working with EPA, but I don't think we did not sign off on the application.
On the petition.
So it's basically the county's waiting to see how the intervening in the court case goes.
I think we're pursuing all avenues. I mean, the
I don't think
petition's
there was-
already.
Yeah,
there.
without
The petition's done,
compromising.
that's, or it didn't matter.
Without compromising
Right, we
anything,
should be getting the
Roger.
results in the next
County attorney's not
6
sitting
weeks,
there.
right?
He's not just sitting
Back
there.
mid-October?
We should know in October,
For EPA,
yeah,
Mhm.
November,
November.
12 months.
2 months, 3 months.
Because
They have
that's
it.
within the
It's
time
not
frame that
12 months.
we're not gonna be doing discovery.
Yeah, I guess what I was thinking is that the county's willing to, I mean, it's not gonna be a cheap investigation.
How much?
And How much? I have no idea, but I'll bet you it's more like 6 figures than 5.
Yeah.
So you're talking about a lot of money. And if you want that kind of support, and if it's really available from the county, I wouldn't spend it now. I'd wait till at least November to see where we are before I would try to chase that dog around.
But at least we could start a discussion.
I would
Well, you
say,
started a discussion about that. I don't know, I'd leave it to Conan as to whether that focuses the discussion in a way that might be less, I mean, I don't know that the money's fungible. Maybe it is.
I think
If they're
what
You're
you
talking about trying to get it in a new budget cycle,
Well, I think it should be labeled contingency,
Could be labeled what?
contingency.
I think,
Because
Well,
to earmark it
some
as
other way.
specifically to do this kind of thing when we don't know if that's gonna happen, but there's a lot of other things that could happen at any moment that would require some kind of immediate action. I'm thinking back to like the first contested case, when the permit was issued with the wrong values, and Gelman waited until the last moment, the last week, to contest it. And neither the city nor the county could respond in time. And so SRSW did and held the line until the next round. But if we had contingency there, just, it's kind of like a letter of credit, you know, that where the county could weigh in and help with whatever situation might arise. And then if it turns out that that would be needed to help with determining what the cost would be to the responsible party to clean it up.
Does the county do contingency funds?
yeah, we could put a line item in, so CARD is within the Environmental Health Department. We could put a line item in there for
A
CARD.
contingency fund?
That is like your budget, you know,
Is that so? Wait, you guys have official standing with that?
We do.
Yeah,
I see some
I'm
head
not,
shaking.
so CARD is an entity, and the county sits on CARD, but,
CARD is not an
CARD is
official
not-
authority.
right. It's not a part of the county per se.
It's not a part of any local government, it's not a
Correct.
nonprofit, it's just
Yeah,
a
it's-
gathering of all the
Right,
interested parties, stakeholders.
right.
I have to go back. Well,
There could be a contingency fund though in the
In
Yeah.
the county.
health department.
from a budget standpoint, it'd be easy to do.
Yeah.
To Kathy's point, I think too, like there's, so budgetarily, there are two really big opportunities. There's the current budget year, because we're gonna do a one-year budget as sort of staving off the big conversation, because we're going through transition with the administrator, a bunch of new commissioners, that sort of thing. So our 2018 budget is going to be, I think, largely a continuation budget. But our revenue is not continuation revenue this year, right? We saw property value increases across the county, so there's an opportunity there. That is the more tactical moment to take advantage of. However, if, what I'm hearing you all say is, this isn't exactly the right time for this kind of a line item. We go into a 4-year budget planning process beginning in January, and making a significant investment on behalf of CARD as part of that 4-year budget would make a lot of sense as well. And that's also, Vince, where we could potentially even get into the higher dollar figures, right? Because
Contingent, or for a consultant.
yeah, because then you're talking about spreading that cost out over 4 years and then doing cash management for whenever you need the money. And that might give CARD enough time to really,
Plan it out.
yeah, talk about this. What do we want to know? What would it
What's the
cost
most
to figure
important
out? Like, who else can provide that information? Can we get it through Discovery?
Well, what can EPA provide us to
Mhm.
save us some money?
You know, we might need, in CARD, we might need a paid staff, for
Dedicated staff.
instance. Because I can't do this forever, you know, taking time away.
I thought you could. We have decades of proof that you can.
I thought you were getting paid, Roger.
My oncologist.
The rest of us are getting paid.
Since we don't quite know where the $30 million is, and we quite don't, I mean, I'm curious. But can a logical, acceptable argument be made that a study, preliminary study on the cost of cleaning up is a reasonable charge to put against the $30 million that's been set aside? It's
Already, no.
already, it's no bonding, it's no budget. Now, it doesn't appear that anybody really knows where it is, but it might actually be part of an exercise to figure out where it really is, and then lay claim
Who
to.
would give out the money, Gilman?
No,
Who
we're
signs
not
the
gonna,
checks?
we're not gonna be able to spend that money. But we will check
Well,
on
who
it.
is?
Yeah.
Galvin is.
I got part of the,
The county could spend the money, CART
Yeah,
doesn't need to
it's
spend
not
the
something
money,
that's up for
but the
grabs.
county might be able to
DEQ,
go after
It's
it.
not really
Yeah,
Gelman.
that's not a good avenue to take, because, but we will find out
Right.
how,
It
where
can't be
the, where the
Gelman's
promise
money
of
if
the
they can
money
go
is.
Chapter 11 and not spend a
I
penny.
I got a question for Conan. Does
You
this
can't be
mean the
half- you
county
can't have
has
it
some
both ways.
extra money to spend?
The county always has extra money to spend.
Oh.
I love
The county is doing well with the economy picking up, like a lot of places. And like you said, the property taxes are going up, except in Scioto Township.
No one else on the board likes to hear me say that until they have a pet project they want funded.
And the county,
Well, yeah,
in
let me get you.
praise of the county, you guys don't squander it on a lot of things like the city might. You know, you don't have a lot of other programs going there.
You're gonna start an art
I think
program.
people say we squander a
Oh,
lot of money.
Well, whatever, but that, you got something in mind?
But thank you,
No.
Jeff, that's
I
nice.
just
Well,
wanted,
you know, relative. It's all relative.
I wanted to clarify, because I thought, I don't know, I just wanted to
We
clarify.
just had a sidebar again about $30 million.
Well, IT support would be a handy thing.
But if it's
Yeah.
Yes, as an
Gelman's
example.
money and Gelman goes bankrupt, what happened to the $30 million?
That's, I think, based on.
Gelman can't have the money and not have control over it if they go bankrupt. Is that money not set
Well,
aside as
this is-
more or less as a
These are
trust
all
fund
questions
with
we
a
don't know
court?
the answer to, and I suggest we really need to move on.
We do.
I mean, we're not.
We got 3 minutes to go over.
I'm
Right,
suggesting
right,
it might
right.
be a question to be answered sometime in the future.
Well, maybe by next meeting we'll have an answer to that.
He had plenty to do. It's
These
somewhere.
last 3 things, a prioritized list of concerns, what I'm gonna do is share it with the card core people of these list of concerns I've gathered and put in a spreadsheet. I think it's just a matter of reviewing a couple of major list of concerns we've provided in the past, and maybe doing a little wordsmithing on it and giving it out to, back to the DEQ in a month or 2. Number 8, card response to EPA public comments period for their risk assessment for toxic substances. Do we want to have a formal card response to that? Does anybody know what that is?
So that's on, you mean the other substances?
I think this is the other 300 and some.
Yeah,
Right.
I'd say that's not within our expertise or our time frame or our attention.
Yeah, and since they took the vapor intrusion out,
Yeah.
it's not really, okay, so we can scratch that. And then the last thing was Superfund status. I think we touched on that a little bit, like we have, maybe November's, we're gonna have something resolved now. There's probably some things I need to send the project manager, some new things I found that would help them
Michael
understand the
Burkhoff.
early days. Yeah, Burkhoff.
Burkhoff asked, you know, if we have things that we're concerned about that's not readily apparent to everybody,
Right.
he would like to know. And we've, you know, I've sent him some stuff, and I shared it with Roger, you know, most of the stuff Roger had on his website, like videotapes, and exactly points on the videotapes where DEQ has said, well, we're not gonna deal with soil, this is a water contamination. He was very interested in that. He's very interested in the soil contamination. I think the 2 million part per billion, if we have any evidence of that, he would be very much interested in that. There's a guy up the street from me who told my wife, Rita, that they used to take barrels and dump them into the woods at Gelman when he was 18 years old. We're trying to
Get his
him-
name, get his testimony.
Yeah, I got his name, I got his number. But Burkhoff.
We get him
said-
in or take a
Burkhoff said, if you have somebody like
audio
that,
of it.
we will send a interviewer down and take a deposition.
Right.
And he's very interested in that. So we're working on this guy. I mean, he's concerned about, you know, liability.
Yeah, I've had a couple of instances like that where I kicked myself for not getting the
So
contact
if anybody
information.
knows of people who have inside information that would be indicative of gross contamination or dumping or things like that, that would be to me, Burkhoff was very concerned about soil contamination. It's not being addressed, among other things, but that was a really.
Because that's where that's an ongoing source, we've kind of proven that,
So he's
especially with the
very- and
MW1.
it's not being dealt with, and that's something that they're gonna really take seriously. Look, nobody's dealing with this, maybe we need to step in, and the thing we've talked to them about too, could be a target situation for them to come in and say, this is how you deal with 1,4-dioxane. We got it all over the country, it's one of the 10 top compounds in the country that now is being considered for the CERCLA, or for the,
Tens of thousands of sites we're gonna end up with.
so this could be like White Lake, where they come in and say, this is a demonstration project. We're gonna show other sites how you deal with 1,4-dioxane, because it's pure form here, pretty much, high concentration, and it's isolated in one area.
Plus we have.
It's the mother of all 1,4-dioxane contamination.
We have varied hydrogeology that can simulate other sites.
So anybody has any information that they, we can pass on?
How do we get that out to the general public, to some of the former Gelman employees and things like that?
I know a few names.
So, I mean,
Some
we start developing
some of whom are no
Can
longer
you,
alive.
well, now's the time to get a hold of them, Maybe if you could start writing down some list of names, and then we go contact them and get their list of names, and then we'll have some people we can have interviewed.
So I know two people. who
So
have the
let's
same
start accumulating
Same
a list like
stories.
that.
The guy up the street and there's somebody else who said, yeah, we used to just dump this stuff.
And then we have to have some protocol, maybe the EPA can help us with this.
EPA will send a lawyer out and take a deposition,
If they bid it.
if we get agreement from the person to do that. He said,
Right.
we'll send that in a heartbeat. Well, we would love to get those kind of depositions.
Right now?
Yeah, yesterday.
Well, let's do it.
Well, we have to get the people to agree to do it.
Well, if you get them in a room together, they'll
Are they reluctant?
Well,
they know they're not the only one.
They're reluctant to some extent. I think we could probably convince them.
Do they feel culpable because they were told to do something?
They were
but
18 years
didn't?
old. The guy's retired now. He's like
Yeah.
60 years old. He said,
Right.
I was only 18.
Right.
He just happens to live like 5 houses up the street from us.
Yeah.
And Rita actually was talking to him, and he started to talk to her. She said, I talk to Scott. Oh, yeah, I used to work for Gelman. And, one thing led to another. He just built his guts.
So you got your list, you're gonna have a list, and let's start keeping a list like that we can talk to people. We need some kind of protocol, like how, maybe the EPA can help with this. How do you convince people to be interviewed? I'm sure they have this kind of thing. And then the other thing, does anybody know Steve Halotnik?
I'm sort of.
Because he still lives in the township. And he was the guy that probably came up with the first database for the company. He was the environmental coordinator before John Sykes, before Farsad. So he's still around, according to the township rules. So that's another one that should be interviewed for the court case. Take a deposition. But he might also want to talk to the EPA.
Have you met him? Have you talked to him?
I might have met him briefly way back when I first got involved, but he might have already been gone about that time, because he ran his private lab afterward and contract with the company after he left. And that was his business, he was doing sampling, so. Anyway, anything else?
Yes, on the last meeting, you said you weren't be here. I go look the date. I won't be here either.
November 7th?
No, October
Oh,
3rd.
no, that one I'll be here for.
Okay.
It's November. I said 2 meetings.
Oh, I didn't hear it.
Yeah, I wanted to give you an extra month.
Oh, okay. I thought the heads up was about the October.
No, October. I'll be here for that. Right.
So Mike, you got an extra 30 days coming.
But that's going to be the DQ. So you also have to video it.
We need somebody else.
Is anybody else got a camera they can just come and set up?
You're not gonna, you don't wanna share the meeting?
I don't mind chairing the meeting, but I'm not competent to be the videographer.
I'll work on
You'll
it.
just
Or the technician.
set up a
and the
camera.
rest of it, yeah.
You have to show me something.
You can borrow one.
I can go down an agenda and point to people, that I can do, but honestly,
Really?
yeah.
All right.
Well, that takes some skill.
Well, I think that's enough to talk about this meeting. So make a motion that we adjourn.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, everybody have a good night.
Thanks for coming.
You sure you want to get involved?
Information, but it's very interesting.
I have some, I started thinking about these tasks that new people can help with.
What, I wrote down the one, every city with the water.
Yeah, that was all, that's one. And you can do that from the Michigan Municipal League site and the Michigan Townships Association.